Hi, I'm Nick Jones, author of the Joseph Bridgeman Time Travel Series, and today I'm going to be doing some time travelling of my own. I'm heading back to Joseph Bridgeman's hometown of Cheltenham. It's the town that I lived in during the writing of the first book in the series, And Then She Vanished. I'm going to be sharing some insights into the writing of that novel and also visiting some of the key locations. So let's hit the road. When I first started writing the series, in my mind it was going to be a mystery thriller, but it was going to be quite dark. I had the idea of the main character losing his sister when she was very young. And what I ended up doing was just writing some sort of diary entries. And that in itself was interesting because I wasn't convinced that a first-person time travel story was going to work. A lot of them are third-person. But then I read Stephen King's time travel book, I read The Time Traveller's Wife, and I thought, you know what? First person is a really interesting way of doing this if I can make it work. I found that I was having quite a lot of fun and that what was coming through was in some ways quite humorous. And that's when I discovered that it wasn't actually going to be purely a thriller. It was going to be a real tapestry of kind of emotions, and I wanted to kind of capture human life and the whole gamut. The writing of that very first book was a really formative experience. So I'm really looking forward to getting back to Cheltenham and revisiting some of those locations that really inspired me and meant so much to me during the writing of that book. Cheltenham's in the southwest of England. It's just on the edge of the Cotswolds. It's a really beautiful Regency spa town, and I was lucky enough to be living here when I was writing And Then She Vanished. I've got this big idea for a time travel story. Could I set it in Cheltenham, the town where I'm living? And I thought, what the hell, why not? Because all these sort of stories that I was reading, they're always set in these huge places. London, New York, Paris, wherever it's going to be. And I thought, how about I tell a time travel story, but I do it from the point of view of just a normal guy who's living in a normal town in Cheltenham. And the more I leaned into that, the more kind of fun that became, knowing where I was going, but starting the story small. And I think that's something I tried to stick to, is to tell small, realistic, authentic stories with this kind of supernatural element to them. Cheltenham became a really big part of the story to me. And they say that location should become a character. And I think for me, Cheltenham is that. And I lived on a street very similar to this one, and it was the first time I'd ever really, I guess, had a grown-up house. So it was a proper big family home. And I remember at the time just imagining this character who'd had all of that and then ended up on his own in this kind of house, and how the years could kind of just roll by and he could just be this real hermit. And I knew that I wanted to sort of have him in a bad place at the start of the book. Because the wonder of time travel, I think, is just that question of what if. So this is Cox's Meadow. It's basically a huge area that was scooped out, and the idea being is that it would form a flood defence for Cheltenham. And that was the initial kind of spark for me in terms of the finale of And Then She Vanished. The ending of that book, there's a big storm. That's actually a real event. So Cheltenham did actually flood really, really badly. It was actually during the time I lived here. This concept of using real world events in my stories, it was a real lightning bolt, and hence the end of the story was a huge storm. So it was a surprise to me. It's funny when that happens, when sort of halfway through writing the book, that big reveal kind of hit me too. So yeah, it's a pretty special place for me, Cox's Meadow. I'll always kind of remember it because of that. The idea of Joseph being a antique dealer kind of really evolved over time. The more I thought about objects, the more it became obvious that they might be the link to travelling back in time. And I thought antiques dealer was so interesting. And again, in Cheltenham, there are some beautiful kind of shop fronts, and it's definitely where I imagine Bridgeman Antiques being. Really beautiful Regency old buildings. What that might be like for Joe if he actually inherited something like that. This idea that he has one life that he leaves, and when he returns, it's completely different. It was my kind of Back to the Future moment, I suppose. Just the idea that, you can inherit something from another version of yourself was kind of like a crazy idea. I feature a lot of parks in the Joseph Bridgeman series. It's something I used to do a lot during my kind of lunch breaks when I worked here. I would just come for a walk around, and that's another great thing with Cheltenham is you've got these beautiful kind of park areas that are kind of dotted all through the town. Everywhere you kind of look, there's a lot of history here, and again, I kind of love the idea of that. And locations have just pop up all the time, and I find that really key when you're coming up with an idea for a scene, is just seeing somewhere that sparks off a location. This is a place where Joe actually meets up with W.P. Brown in the second book. To be honest, take out a few things around here and we could be 100 years ago easily. So that sort of thing just really fires me up. As Alexia Finch's character became clearer to me, it was obvious that this is the kind of place where she would work, just somewhere that was kind of above Joe really, and somewhere that he'd be quite nervous of actually going to. So the scene where he's sort of pacing up and down outside the hypnotherapist's office, I wanted it to feel this kind of sense of grandeur about it, and it just seemed very obvious to me that this was the kind of place that Alexia would work. And I also, when I came up with the idea of Vinny, I wanted Vinny to be the kind of friend that we all wish we had. At that point, I was looking around Cheltenham and I actually found a record shop, and I spent a bit of time in there, and I thought, this is it. This is where I want it to be. And that's how Vinny's character kind of evolved, and it's so good to see the reaction from fans of Vinny. Any scene where I get Joe and Vinny together, something just clicks, and it just seems to work. It's almost one of those things where it pretty much writes itself. I'm outside Vinny's vinyl. We're going to go and take a look around. And couldn't you just imagine Vinny at the back of the shop, chuckling away to himself, sorting through some boxes. And there's just something about places like this. The whole thing, the smell of it, all the old records. It wasn't difficult to imagine this would be a place that Joe would come to see his friend. So yeah, pretty cool. People often ask me if Joseph Bridgeman is actually based on anybody real. And the simple answer is, yeah, he's kind of me really. And lots of my kind of experiences have gone into those books. I wanted it to feel real and authentic, and I like the idea that if somebody discovered that they could time travel, that they wouldn't necessarily just jump at the chance and fully embrace their new abilities. I thought they'd be actually pretty scared. But also a lot of my experiences around music as well. Like music has always been a big passion for me. When I was younger, I was in various bands, and behind me here is the town hall. But when I was about 20 years old, the band that I was in, we won a competition to be support for quite a big band who were playing here at the time. I remember being up on stage, absolutely petrified. We went out to this huge crowd, and it was absolutely deafening. And then I just became quite overwhelmed with just euphoria, that we were actually doing this. And I remember looking down, and there was a guy right at the very front, I will never forget it. And he was looking up at me and he was mouthing something. I kind of frowned and looked down at him, and he was just saying, he was basically saying, "You're crap." And I remember thinking, yeah, okay, maybe, we had rehearsed, I thought we were pretty good, but each to their own. But I looked back down at him and I very clearly made sure he could understand me. I said, "But I'm up here." And that kind of stuck with me really. There's always going to be haters, and I think, but at the end of the day, you have to get on and you have to do these things. I mean, that was an incredible experience for me, scary but incredible. In many ways that sort of shaped my approach to being an author as well. Releasing my books indie initially, you have to be brave to do that, and you have to expect for some people to love it and some people to hate it, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. And the whole storyline with Mark DeStella, that was all true. That's all kind of me. So yeah, is Joe based on anyone? Yeah, he's me. Watching films has always been a really big passion of mine. And I think that's where most of my ideas come from. And I think that's such an important thing as a creative person, is to make sure that you're filling your inkwell and taking inspiration from things really. And for me, Back to the Future sparked off my my interest, I suppose, in time travel, as well as films like The Terminator and all those kind of classic sort of science fiction time travel films. But also there was a film with Christopher Reeve where he's kind of thinks his way into the past, and that really had a huge impact on me, and obviously made its way into the Joseph Bridgeman books. And I love this idea that somebody is so hurt by what had happened in the past and so kind of desperate to change it that they kind of accidentally time travel by just being so passionate about getting back there and having this kind of latent ability unlocked in them. And so the idea of sort of hypnosis and enabling time travel without any machines or any tech really appealed to me. So I suppose the idea, it evolved over time. I didn't have the whole book in one go, but certainly that initial spark was all it took. And I think whenever I'm coming up with a concept for a book, I really listen to that. If that initial spark it just says yes, like there's something here, then it's just a case of exploring it. And I explored it for months before I actually started writing it. Leckhampton Hill features quite a lot in the first book, and I used to spend a lot of time up here with my family, walking the dogs, and also I used to do quite a bit of mountain biking. So Leckhampton Hill for me, actually that's where the idea for Joe getting amnesia and knocking himself out, because I used to throw myself down this hill, and it's pretty scary, but yeah, when you check out the view, I guess there's something romantic about it, the perfect romantic location for Joe to say goodbye to Alexia at the end of book one, where he's heading back to try and save Amy. I hope you found that brief tour of the locations from And Then She Vanished interesting. It was fun for me to go back and just remember where I was in terms of the writing process at that point. If you want to check out the rest of the series, you can find that in all the usual places. It's also available on audiobook. And if you want to stay in touch with me, the best place is Facebook. I've got a private Facebook group you can join. And yeah, who knows, maybe we'll do this again sometime. I think I fancy going to the Paris Opera House next.